Welcome to SportsbookReview.com's Play Action Podcast. Dave Farra, Matt Brown, and Joe Fortenbaugh with you. Very exciting week for all of us, boys. Week number 1 of the NFL is upon us. Now, obviously, before the season gets going, there's plenty of preseason to talk about. There's camps, and everyone has opinions as to what's going on and how it's going to affect the regular season once we actually get into it. And I think you can make a fair argument that sometimes it's a little bit overanalyzed. So we want to help to squash that right now. Two experts here in Joe Fortenbaugh and Matt Brown talking about how you actually approach week number 1. Joe, we'll start with you on this. When it actually comes down to it, how much of the chatter and the overanalyzation do you have to put aside to make sure you're making the right plays come week number 1?
I love week number 1 for one key reason. We've had months to prepare for this. Now, you don't want to suffer from paralysis by overanalysis, as many will say. So I'll offer this one tip. Don't go into week 1 looking to bet on every single game. And if you struggle early, don't look to get it back in the afternoon. There's so much excitement that builds up in the 9 months leading up to this week that it's easy to go overboard. It's easy to catch yourself in a situation where you might be down a bit after the 1 o'clock games if you're on the East Coast. So you come back firing late trying to make that money up. Understand it's a plan and it's a long-term plan. Bankroll management is just as important as handicapping, researching, and getting the best of the number. And I think that's what a lot of younger or less experienced sports bettors hurt themselves. I think that's a department where they could get burned. Matt, I'm not sure if you agree with that, but the one thing I always say going into week 1, I tell myself every Sunday morning, stick to the plan. Don't get overwhelmed, whether you're winning or you're losing.
One of the things I think it very important for everyone to remember as well, Joe, is just we think we know who these teams are, but we really don't know who these teams are just yet. I mean, some of these teams on paper got better. Some of these teams on paper got worse. Some of them stayed just about the same. But again, that is on paper and that is in preseason. We won't really know who these teams and what their identity is for another 2 or 3 weeks. And so I'm with you. Listen, find something you feel very confident in. And we've got a couple that we'll talk about later that we feel really good. That being said, don't chase anything. Don't do something that you don't feel very comfortable with, especially in these first few weeks, because man, these NFL teams, we think we know who they are, and they come out with a completely different identity, and then you can really start to hone in on where they excel and where they don't excel and where you can really exploit some of these lines that come out.
All right, well, and to play off of that for one quick moment, I'm not one of these guys, but I know of several guys in Las Vegas who do this for a living. They avoid the first 3 weeks of the NFL season entirely based solely on that point, because every year there are so many teams that rise way above what their preseason stature gave them, and there are a lot of teams that fail to perform or live up to the expectations that their preseason status awarded them. So a lot of guys, not a lot, but some guys choose to sit out the first few weeks just to better assess the situation, and then they like to get involved in week 4.
Would you say that taking that approach is much more important in this day and age, because we've seen things like running back by committee become more of a norm for these teams, and so you don't know if a squad's going to rely heavily on the running game or if it's a single individual, and like you said, because we're dealing with a lot of unknowns maybe as opposed to one unknown, you don't have that workhorse like you have in the past. Do you think that lends to that thinking of, let's give it a couple of weeks before we really start laying the big action?
I actually don't think. I actually don't. I like week 1 because these lines come out so early, and because these lines are out so early, they've had time to kind of move with how the public perception has just become over these teams. They watch the pregame shows, and if someone tells them the team is good, then the team is going to be good. They watch the pregame shows and they watch the camp videos, and someone says the team's going to be bad, then the team's going to be bad. I've really dug into every single NFL team. I have pretty strong convictions about how I feel they're going to do. So how I feel they're going to do differs from what public perception is, then I like to take advantage of these
week 1 lines. So that's an opportunity to exploit.
Yeah, I like to take advantage of these week 1 lines for that.
All right. So
perfect example, Dave, would be the New England Patriots. What are they going to do without Julian Edelman? So many people think it's going to be a guy like Chris Hogan just sliding into the role. It's not. The Patriots are more likely to completely adjust their offensive game plan rather than to just try to plug a guy who isn't Julian Edelman into Julian Edelman's role.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up. We'll actually touch on the Thursday night game towards the end of the podcast, along with a couple of college games. Right now, heading over to SBRodds.com. Let's run this down. We'll start here with Oakland and Tennessee. This started out as a very close game. The line has shifted a little bit in the favor of Tennessee right now. We're seeing Tennessee getting about 2.5 points. Joe, you know a lot about the Raiders, and you've been covering them for a long time. What are you seeing coming out of that camp, and comparing that with how Tennessee stacks up? Do you like this game, or are you staying away?
This is one of the sharper plays of the week based on the move. And I'm telling you, if you can get in before 3, you're going to want to get in on the Tennessee Titans for 2 key reasons. Number one, from an analytical perspective, there are a lot of trends that point to the Oakland Raiders taking a step back this season. First and foremost, look at how they fared in 1-score games last season. I believe they were 8-1 or 9-1. That tends to be a great predictor for a regression. Or on the flip side, if you're like the Philadelphia Eagles and you were terrible in 1-score games, the next year you're going to bounce back in a big way. So the Oakland Raiders, from a 1-score game perspective, there are a lot of metrics pointing to a regression. In addition to that, this defense is atrocious. There are questions, all right, just questions along the defensive line. But the linebacker position has 3 of 4 players who have no starting experience whatsoever. Middle linebacker is going to be a big albatross for the Raiders early in the season. They're looking to start Markel Lee at middle linebacker. Lee is a mid-round pick out of Wake Forest who's never started an NFL game in his life, going up against a 2-headed rushing attack in DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry. Now, on the flip side, you also have a cornerback position in David Amerson coming off a concussion, Sean Smith, who's way past his prime, and a safety position that's depleted now that second-round pick Obi Melifonwu has been placed on injured reserve. So between the age of Reggie Nelson, the relative inexperience of Carl Joseph, this defense is a major problem. If I'm looking at 2 things here, number 1, it'd be laying the points with Tennessee, which we're seeing in the movement, and number 2, it would be going over the total of around 51.5. Now, you can shop here at SBRodds.com, and you can find yourself some better prices. So you got to be focused on that.
Yeah.
That happens to be one of the better terms, but I'm telling you, this game's going over because Derek Carr and the offense, they can hang 30.
Listen, this is one of those teams that I was talking about whenever we were opened up the show right here. I mean, Oakland is everyone's darling. Everyone is all over the Raiders. The Raiders overperformed last year. They outkicked their coverage, and everyone is wondering, will they be able to do it again? No, they will not be able to do it again. And this is a prime example right here, starting the season on the road with a much improved Tennessee team. And like you said, Joe, if you get to shopping the odds around out here, I mean, over at BetDSI, whenever you look at SBR odds, this is a pick'em game right now. So you don't have to lay any points whatsoever if you wanted to go get Tennessee. And so obviously that's where you want to head on over there. Kind of the importance of having, multiple accounts, especially if you are going to be taking NFL seriously this year, because you can really shop the better odds. I mean, right now, it's 2.5 at other places, and you can get it at pick over at BetDSI. So this is certainly one of those games where I would head over there. Listen, I like what Tennessee's going to be doing this year. I think Marcus Mariota takes a big step forward. They got him some weapons on offense. Eric Decker being one of those, who is a very, very big red zone threat for them. And I honestly really love Tennessee in this game. And Dave, if you head over to sportsbookreview.com, they have a couple of season-long contests going on over there. And if I were in my entries into this contest, I'm going to be picking Tennessee in one of these contests. But you can let everybody know kind of what's going on over there and how much money you can win for this. Yeah,
when you talked about not knowing teams coming into the season, I think that this next game, Arizona and Detroit, is one of those interesting moments where we don't really know exactly what we're going to get from either one of these squads. And Matt, we'll talk about what you were just mentioning in a moment. But first, dive into Arizona and Detroit, if you would. This one is relatively close as well. Detroit's getting about 3 points in most places. In some cases, though, Arizona is at -2. So it really just depends on where you look. And again, all that's laid out for you at SBRodds.com. But how are you approaching this game, if at all?
I don't really like this game one way or the other. If I was going to lay some money here, Joe, I would probably go on Arizona. I think everybody is really kind of staying away from the Cardinals because Carson Palmer was hurt all at the end of last year, and they look at this thing and everyone talks about how old he's getting, even though he's basically the same age as Eli Manning, and no one talks about how old Eli Manning is getting. To me, I think Arizona has a chance, and very well, I've been documented as saying I think the Cardinals are going to win the division. So for me, even on the road here, while Carson Palmer's fresh, while Larry Fitzgerald is fresh, I really like Arizona. And getting this at -1.5, it looks like, maybe 2 in a lot of places, but you can get it at 1 at 5 dimes. So for me, I would be going Arizona here.
I don't like the game, but I'll tell you this. If I have to make a play on every single game on the card,
right?
If there's a situation where I can have a home dog, I'm going to take the home dog in week 1. I'm not sure what to make of the Cardinals this season. They only covered the number in 3 of their final 10 games last year. Now, granted, they dealt with a lot of injuries, and they have one of the best running backs in the game.
They get Tyrann Mathieu back. He was gone for a good bit of the season. You have a healthy Carson Palmer. You have a healthy Larry Fitzgerald. So something to think about anyway. John Brown is supposed to be making his way back as well.
You do, but you also have the highest paid player in the NFL in Matthew Stafford. And last season, look at his numbers under offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter before and after the finger injury. His entire season, and the Rams season for that matter, or for the most part, was derailed late in the year when Stafford's numbers fell apart because of the finger injury. He's coming back healthy. I think this is a dark horse candidate to make some serious noise, in the NFC. And I think Arizona's overvalued coming into the season. I would take the home dog here, and you can get Detroit in many shops at the moment +2.
So, Matt, you mentioned it just a moment ago. SBR actually has 2 football contests that are taking place this season. Beat the Prick is one of them with a $40K prize purse. The object of that game is to compete against the Prick, a professional handicapper. The Prick will make 5 picks on NFL or college football sides or totals by 5 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays of each week. The sides totals he selects will be taken off the board, so you must make 5 plays each week to be eligible for that week's free play prize, and you must make 70 total plays participating in 14 weeks to be eligible for that $40,000 in cash prizes. So we're talking about big cash prizes. You must make 1 2-unit best bet each week. All of the players will be based on 1 unit, and you must beat the Prick to win. If the Prick scores +3 in a given week and you score +310, you will have beaten the Prick, but if the score goes 5-0 that week, nobody wins. Players must have a positive score to earn prizes. Simple enough. First place, $10,000
and $30,000. Across the other prizes that are going to be paid out, and beat the bag is kind of the same thing there, except just a little bit smaller prize pool. $7,500 going to first there. So basically, you just have to win more units each week than the Prick does or the bag does, and you can take home some of this big money, Joe. Definitely contest that you and I will both be playing in this year.
I'll be right in there. I've already got the picks I want for week 1. We'll reveal some of those by the end of the show.
Okay, this one, there's a pretty big spread on this, depending on where you look. 6.5, 7 points is what Atlanta's getting over Chicago. Hard to disagree with that, but Joe, can you make a case that maybe this game would be a little bit closer than what a lot of the lines are saying right now?
Absolutely. The Bears have been in this situation before, at home, outdoors, on the grass at Soldier Field, which always tends to be a little bit longer. It might not seem like that's a major factor, but what are the Falcons? Who are the Falcons? They're just like the Saints. They are an indoor, fast-track dome team. And when you take Drew Brees and the Saints outside, what happens? The offense comes unglued, at least to an extent. You do not see the Hall of Fame caliber performances from Drew Brees or any of his wide receivers. A similar situation is going to happen with Atlanta in this game. Now, the focus for the Bears is generally on 2 things. 1, a lackluster offense going to be led by Mike Glennon, quarterback in week number 1. And 2, the fact that this team could be tanking off the season to get themselves a better draft pick. However, this is a lot of points to lay, and no one ever talks about the defense in Chicago, led by coordinator Vic Fangio and head coach John Fox, who, say what you want about his game management and his conservative play calling at times, he is a defensive-minded coach. I think if you're going to have the Super Bowl loser going on the road outdoors week 1, laying 7 against a defense like this, I take the Bears here.
Matt, that's actually an interesting point that Joe just mentioned with the Super Bowl losers. Do you think that the Super Bowl hangover is a real thing, and will it affect this game or not?
I don't really buy into that narrative too much, but what I do buy into is the Falcons starting on the road in Chicago against a defense that I actually think is going to be pretty good this year and definitely surprise some people, especially their front 7. Now, you're going to be able to pass on these guys, but you're still going to need to be able to run the ball in order to have tons of success, and I believe that the Bears are going to be able to hold people in check. And so with that, Joe, what I really like here, not so much the number, but the total. This coming in at 49 at a lot of places. If you go over to BetDSI, 50.5, I love the under on 50.5 here. Listen, if we buy into the Bears being a better defense and we buy into them not wanting to have Mike Glennon exposed so much, what are we going to get? We're going to get a healthy dose of Jordan Howard running the football. If you run the football, you run time. When you run time, there's not a lot of time on the clock for people to score. So for me, I like the under here, and especially if I can get it at 50.5 at one of the books. Looking here at SBR odds, I definitely like that. I would take the under here.
The other game that has the biggest spread on Sunday, at least, is Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Plus 8.5 for Cleveland in some spots, plus 10 in others. Joe, do you think it's going to be this much of a blowout for Pittsburgh over Cleveland?
Pittsburgh's a hell of a team, and people look at the Steelers and they see Roethlisberger, Brown, and Bell, and they know this offense can make a lot of noise. But they're going against a divisional opponent who's very familiar in what they want to do. They also have no idea how they're going to play Deshaun Kaiser because they've never seen him before. Rookie quarterback out of Notre Dame, lining up under center in Hugh Jackson's offense for the Browns. I'm iffy on the side because Pittsburgh is explosive enough to find a way to add one more score on late in order to backdoor a possible spread that they might not have been covering the rest of the way. But I would look to the total here. The first thought with Pittsburgh, again, is a very explosive offense, but Cleveland's defense is vastly underrated. And again, what are we going to get in Deshaun Kaiser? He is an unknown who could have a big game, or he could be like most rookie quarterbacks in their debut, and he could struggle. I would look to under the total in Pittsburgh, Cleveland.
Yeah, this is a pass for me. I don't like the number in this game because there's a lot of reasons going on here. One, what I perceive to be an improved Browns defense. Two, Martavis Bryant's back in the fold. And listen, that is a good thing for the Steelers in the long haul, but he's not played with these guys very much. Le'Veon Bell out all of training camp. And listen, Le'Veon Bell's the best running back in the league. However, for us to think that he's going to step right in and just act like absolutely nothing happened and just pick up exactly where everything left off, I don't know if we can really assume that at this juncture right here. Ben Roethlisberger was a little perturbed at him too as well for holding out as long as he did. So you kind of got to wonder where that's going to play out. Really don't like this number. Really don't like this game at all, to be honest with you. This is a complete pass for me.
This next one's interesting because of all the outside elements that Houston has had to deal with Hurricane Harvey that's been going on. But then Jacksonville hasn't exactly had a calm, cool, and collected training camp and preseason coming into this either because of everything going on with Blake Bortles. And then all of Florida is worried in their own right about the hurricane that's coming through this weekend. So, Matt, what say you about Jacksonville and Houston? Houston getting between 4 and 5.5 at most spots. You even see it as high as 6.
Yeah, so this is probably the hardest game on the board for me. And Joe, I don't know if you agree or not, but this is one of those things where you have two very good defenses going up against two very bad quarterbacks. But the problem is that the total is so low as well. Do you really feel okay going to under here in this game with what we perceive to be two of the maybe 5 worst quarterback situations in the entire league? For me, listen, if I just had to pick an outright winner here, I might take Jacksonville just in the upset if that was something that if I was feeling really froggy here, because I think it's one of those things where if Jacksonville keeps it close, they probably win the game. That means Blake Bortles, they've gotten a good game out of him. I think superior talent on the Jacksonville side from top to bottom, but I just don't see any way that I can lay any money on this game.
You got to play the emotional angle here on both sides. For Houston, it's obvious. It's a team that's going to rally around their city. They've already said, as members of the Texans, they're going to dedicate this season to the city of Houston, to the rebuilding of Houston. J.J. Watt, at the time of this podcast, has raised over $27 million for the city of Houston. They're a feel-good story. And you know when they finally get in that locker room, they're going to rally around Watt, who they lost last season to a back injury, and they're going to step up and use that rallying cry. How long that lasts throughout the season remains to be seen, but it will play an effect in week 1. Conversely, you have the Jacksonville Jaguars, talented everywhere but at the quarterback position. But look at the way head coach Doug Marrone and general manager Tom Coughlin approached the quarterbacks this season. 1 minute, they're announcing that Blake Bortles isn't going to be their starter. It's an open competition. They're not happy. And then 3 days later, they come right back.
One half of football later. Well, that's all it was. It was one half of football later, and they decided that they were able to do it.
It's like, all right, Bortles is getting the job. If you're in that locker room, virtually all 32 teams should come out emotional in week 1. I think in Jacksonville, they already realize they've got a problem on their hands at quarterback. There are a lot of good players on that team, notably wide receiver Allen Robinson, who, if you saw during training camp, would get wide open in these one-on-one workouts and then would be overthrown by a mile by either Henne or Bortles. I think the team's frustrated with the quarterback situation. I would play Houston here. I don't know how you guys land on 2-team 6-point teasers, but I think this is an excellent half for a 2-team 6-point teaser. You can take the 5.5 that Houston is laying, knock it all the way down. They just need to win the game outright. And then you can pair it up with a team like Tennessee, who would be getting 4 points. That's a nice little setup for me.
All right, again, sticking with SBRodds.com. This next game, Joe, a whole different bag of tricks in a much different way. We got the New York Jets and we got Buffalo, and we're seeing an enormous difference depending on where you look. Again, SBRodds.com, you can see all the different books and where they have it listed. But, I mean, Buffalo is a 10-point favorite in some spots, other places a 6-point favorite, whereas the Jets, coming in anywhere in that same range, plus 8.5 in some spots. It's all over the map. How do you see this game?
let me ask you a question. When was the last time we saw a situation where there was a team like the Buffalo Bills who was actively tanking based on their free agency, draft, and preseason moves, actively showing us they're tanking, and yet they come out in week 1 and find themselves as a 10-point favorite? I can't remember the last time I've seen anything like this.
Never.
I cannot believe this scenario. However, like Matt felt about Houston and the Jets, that's how I feel about this game. I can't trust either of these teams to make a play in any regard. I could see both quarterbacks playing so poorly that the defenses score plenty of points and take it over the total. I could see both offenses being so bad, no points get put on the board. For me, it's a total pass. Matt, I don't know how you feel.
The only thing that I feel about this game is if you can get it at 6 in one spot and 10 at another, maybe you go for the middle here, Joe, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I might try to just middle this game right here because, again, range of outcomes in this one, like you mentioned, are astronomical because, I mean, this could be a 10-7 game or like you said, we're talking about 2 pick sixes, a punt return, and next thing you know, this game's got 50 points somehow. But for me, maybe I'm looking at a middle situation right there, especially if I can get a 10 and a 6. I mean, Bet DSI is at 6 right now. 5 Dimes is at 10 right now. Seems like a pretty good opportunity right there.
All right, next up is Baltimore and Cincinnati. This is one of those games that's a little bit spooky. It's close. So Cincinnati is favored by 3 almost everywhere, 2.5 at 5 Dimes, but otherwise -3 across the board. They're going up against Baltimore, though. We know that these teams don't like each other. Joe, how do you see this one? Or is this a game that you're interested in playing, or are you staying away?
I go right to that sportsbook 5 Dimes like you were talking about, and I lay the 2.5 because it's the best value on the board. The Bengals can't close. We know that. Marvin Lewis has been the coach there forever, and he's never won a playoff game. The Bengals are not closers, but they do start the season on a strong note. Last 26 games played in the month of September, 18-6-2 against the spread. 18-6-2 against the spread over the last 26 games played in the month of September. I'd lay the 2.5 because I trust the Bengals to play some decent football this year. I can't say the same thing about Baltimore. Joe Flacco's health is in question, and ever since that Super Bowl run, his play has been in significant decline. What's the defense going to look like? They're only another year older. And what do the wide receivers look like? You're telling me Mike Wallace is the guy you're going to lean on? Matt, I'm not buying into the Ravens this year.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. Cincinnati is one of my favorite plays this week as well, Joe. I mean, look, this is the healthiest Cincinnati's going to be all year long, so you should take advantage of this. This is Tyler Eifert is healthy probably for about a week, so you take advantage of that. AJ Green is healthy. He misses a couple of games nearly every single year. If any of the backs, there's maybe Jeremy Hill's a little bit nicked up, but they say he's going to start, but they have 2 other backs they can go to here, and obviously Andy Dalton is healthy as well. This offense, when they're going to be clicking, is going to be one of the better offenses in the league. But again, this is all health dependent. Entering week 1, that's where they are at. They are in a healthy mode right now. Love Cincinnati here. And like you said, Joe, I'll take the half point. I'll put the money at 5 Dimes.
So this next game is interesting. Philadelphia over at Bet DSI is 2.5 point dogs. However, if you look in other places, they're 1.5 point favorites, like over on Heritage. So, Joe, this one, it appears that depending on the book that you look at, there's some pretty significant swings. What do you see coming out of this 1 p.m. Eastern time game between the Eagles and the Redskins?
Dave, the swings you're talking about speak to the fact that we don't really know what to expect from either one of these teams this year. Kirk Cousins lost a couple of his best weapons on the Washington offense. He also lost his offensive coordinator. Philadelphia, coming off a really solid season last year, first year with Carson Wentz, they're projected by many to take a big step forward this season. I would look to the over in this game. Last 6 meetings between these two teams, the over is 5-1. You got an over-under sitting out there, 47.5. Philadelphia can score. They added Alshon Jeffrey and some other weapons on offense. I think Kirk Cousins can do just enough against a questionable Philly defense. I would lean to the over here. That's my favorite of the 4 options. Matt?
Yeah. So you said over, not the under. Good, because I like the over. Yes, I like the over as well. Look. The reason this game got to where it got is to where it is right now is because Kirk Cousins didn't play very well in the preseason, and people are letting what happened in the preseason influence what's going on here. He needed to get familiar with the people around him, like you mentioned, Joe. This is going to be a new cast. However, it's still going to be a talented cast around him. And I actually think Kirk Cousins can play a lick in the NFL, to be honest with you. I actually think the guy's all right. I do think that Philadelphia on their side of the ball is going to take a big step forward. I see Zach Ertz having a big year. I I see Alshon Jeffrey having a big year. Bet on himself in this year, so you better believe he is going to try to put up huge numbers to get that big contract for him. I like the over in this game as well. I think this game turns into a pretty good shootout. I think Philadelphia's defense is going to get better over the course of the season. I don't know how good they're going to be in week 1 right here.
So this is fascinating. The Rams are 4-point favorites in places like Pinnacle. However, they're 3-point dogs still over on BetDSI, and most of these lines shifted when the word came out that Andrew Luck was not going to be starting for the Indianapolis Colts at quarterback. But I mean, we're talking about an enormous difference here, 7-point difference as to where you can get this game right now. So you talk about maybe middling opportunities, Matt. Is this one of those games where you would consider that, or are you making a straight play on one of these teams?
I'm wondering if that game got pulled off or something, Joe, because there's no way it didn't move whenever the Rams whenever it came out that the Colts were not going to be starting Andrew Luck. This team is going to be a dumpster fire. They are already horrible on defense, and the only reason that this could be a decent game right here is because Andrew Luck was going to keep it in it with his arm. He's not going to be playing. Scott Tolzien is going to be starting for the Indianapolis Colts. This is a big downgrade to basically everyone around him on offense as well. For me, love the Rams at home in week 1 here, even without Donald. Listen, it's not completely ruled out that he's not going to play, Joe. Obviously, he could sign sometime in the next couple of days, and I imagine a guy of his talent, they go ahead and just stick him out there, and that just gives them that's just another reason for me to like the Rams in this game.
Couldn't agree with you more. For the Rams, keep it simple. Run the football with Todd Gurley. Manage the clock. Don't take any big risks because you really don't need to put Jared Goff out on an island. Everybody knows the Browns, the Bills, the Jets. These are not good football teams. But the Colts are a mirage because people see Andrew Luck at times and they feel that they're a contender. Newsflash, without Luck, this could be the worst team in the league, like Matt said. And new general manager Chris Ballard and his understudy Ed Dodds aren't committed to any of these guys. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if the Colts eventually shut Andrew Luck down for the entire season, specifically to find themselves at the top of the draft next year so they could trade that pick, knowing they already have a quarterback and that there are several talented quarterbacks coming out. They trade that pick, move back like Cleveland did in the Philadelphia trade, or like the Rams trade that went down when they came up for Jared Goff. You move back, you end up acquiring more picks. You can bring in some new starters, young, and start fresh.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for you fantasy players out there, Joe, this is a bad situation for the Colts. This is a downgrade. Yeah, downgrade for basically every single person on that team.
Nice little 6-point tease as well with the Rams. It takes you through to where they're getting points. You might as well play that if you need another half to close out.
This next game, not so confusing across the board. Seattle, 3-point dogs. Green Bay, 3-point favorites. And that's all the way across the board looking here on SBRodds.com. What do you say, Joe? Do you think that's accurate?
I would take the points with Seattle. I think it's accurate, but I would take the points with Seattle here. Love Green Bay. But what do they have? They've got Aaron Rodgers, and then what? Who's the next best player on that team? This is the biggest fundamental problem with the Packers and the way they run their organization. It's a tight ship, but it's too tight. They don't spend money in free agency, and they're going to end up going, 30 years with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, and they're going to come away with 2 Super Bowls? Granted, it's better than 0, but you might go 30 years with 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and you come away with 2 Super Bowl wins because you don't build around them. I think Seattle is extraordinarily nasty this season. The offensive line is going to give them some problems, but between Russell Wilson and that defense in week 1, I would take the points with the dog.
I actually think this is a sneaky under right here. I think people are going to look and they're going to see Aaron Rodgers. They're going to see Russell Wilson. They're going to see that how bad the defense for the Packers was last season. I am under the impression that it can't be any worse against the pass. So, I mean, if there's anything that can be done here, it could only get better. And for me, I think this is kind of a sneaky under. 51 is a whole lot of points here. If we think that maybe they at some point try to play a little bit of ball control here and it's not absolutely nuts. I'm trying to think of best case scenario here and trying to play the game out in my head. How does this game win for the Seahawks, who I also believe are going to win this game? I don't think it's getting in a shootout with Aaron Rodgers is the best way for them to win this game. So for me, I lean the under because I also believe the Seahawks are going to win this game.
All right, jumping over here to Carolina and San Francisco. You're getting Carolina as 4-point favorites in some spots, 6-point in other, mostly though falling into that 5.5 range. San Francisco anywhere from 4 to 6-point dogs. Matt, you're up first.
This is a very interesting game, Joe. I'm sure you're going to have tons of insight into this one. I'm actually weirdly of the mindset that this San Francisco team is not going to be as bad on offense as everybody thinks. I mean, Brian Hoyer does have starting experience in this league. He does have veteran wide receivers. He does have a workhorse running back behind him. I kind of think that this is a sneaky chance to get San Francisco, with Carolina going all the way across the country, Cam Newton coming back off an injury. Everyone's going to be super hyping Carolina because Christian McCaffrey, and all I hear about is how he's going to run wild here over this San Francisco team. I feel this could be a sneaky spot for the 49ers. What say you?
The problem with the 49ers, and while this is a rebuild that's already off on the right foot, the problem is the interior offensive line. The guard position is really questionable for San Francisco. They went out and just traded for Laken Tomlinson. The guy was a first-round pick of the Lions 2 years ago. They've already given up on him, and the Niners picked him up because of pure desperation. They lost Joshua Garnett, a first-round pick of their own out of Stanford from 2 drafts ago, to a knee surgery that ended up being much more serious than anyone ever let on. All throughout the preseason, San Francisco struggled to run the football. I think they're going to struggle again to run the football, and that's going to lead to a big problem against the Carolina team that's going to attack them with a lot of interior pressure. Hoyer's turnover prone, so while I think the Niners are headed in the right direction, I don't see them scoring a lot of points. But the Niner front seven is much more impressive than people realize. Reuben Foster alongside Navarro Bowman in the middle at linebacker. That's a great 1-2 punch. And up front, you got a lot of youth in Solomon Thomas, the first-round pick that just came out of Stanford, Eric Armstead, Earl Mitchell, who you just picked up, DeForest Buckner, another first-round pick. I think this game goes under. 48 points is too high in my opinion. I could see this game being somewhere in the neighborhood of 21-10, 21-13.
All right, our Sunday night game is a really interesting one. This is the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of distractions going on for the Cowboys. Obviously, you've heard plenty about Ezekiel Elliott and what in the hell is going on there. Looks like he is going to be playing. However, what is going to happen with the Giants and the Cowboys when they actually come down to it? Is this a game, even without all those distractions, that the Cowboys could easily lose? That's entirely possible, too. Joe, you're up first on this one. What do you think?
The Giants are 6-2 against the spread in their last 8 trips to Dallas. The Giants beat Dallas twice last year. People are concerned about New York's offensive line, and Odell Beckham is a bit banged up, but Eli Manning owns this stadium. You're telling me there are points on the board for the Giants in this game? I'm going to go out there, and not only am I going to take them, I'm going to play the Giants on the money line. Dallas has multiple starters on the defensive end, multiple new starters on the defensive side of the ball. They've already suffered a couple injuries. I think you've got a year to study Dak Prescott tape, and this is a team that beat them twice last season. Like I said, I like the Giants here, and I like them a lot.
The best defense that nobody's talking about. This Giants defense is going to be a bear all season long. You're going to be looking at Giants games, and you're going to keep having to wonder, should I take the under in this game because of that Giants defense? I'm telling you, Joe, I think this Giants defense is going to be one of the top 5 in the league, and we're going to be looking every single week to maybe exploit an under, because I think they're going to be holding some really, really good teams to some really low totals this year. So I am with you here. I think the Giants win this game outright, even with Ezekiel Elliott. I don't think he's going to have room to run here. I think they're going to have to go and try to rely on the arm of Dak Prescott. And listen, Dak Prescott did great last year. Don't get me wrong, above expectation. I think he regresses to the mean a little bit this year. I like the Giants in this game as well.
All right, and of course, before we move off Sunday, definitely worth mentioning, in case you haven't heard, postponed game, Tampa Bay, Miami, because that storm coming through, that's going to be pushed until November 19th, which is week number 11, when they're both scheduled to have a bye week. So obviously, we're not going to handicap that one.
And from a betting perspective, Joe, certainly something we need to keep an eye on, because that's going to be a brutal stretch for both of these teams when it comes down to there. So we're going to need to see kind of how they are performing at that level. It might be something, I hate to say a natural tragedy is something that we could exploit from a betting perspective down the road, but it might be something that we can look at.
You have to factor in anything, just like you factor in weather on any given week.
Yeah, it's going to be a brutal stretch for those teams.
Absolutely.
Especially with Miami having to travel to London and come back. No bye week anymore.
That's brutal. All right, over to Monday Night Football. We have ourselves a doubleheader. It is the New Orleans Saints and the Minnesota Vikings. In this one, the Vikings are the 3.5-point favorite pretty much across the board here, and New Orleans is a 3 to 3.5-point dog. Matt, how do you see this one?
This is a pass for me. I look real hard at this game, and I think this number is right on, to be honest with you. I think that Minnesota is probably the favorite, a small favorite at that. And I think a lot of this number reflects what people are really curious as to what we're going to get out of this New Orleans team. I mean, look, they got rid of Brandon Cooks. He's out of town. So now Michael Thomas is the number one receiver there. Is Drew Brees still Drew Brees? I mean, we've seen time and time again, these guys hit a certain age, they come out and they're just a different person. We saw it with Peyton Manning, you know, I mean, like had a historic season, came out and couldn't throw the ball 20 yards downfield. So is Drew Brees still Drew Brees? Is Adrian Peterson actual running back in this league, or is he just a shell of himself? So I think there's a lot of question marks going on in this game right here. For me, I want to see what this New Orleans team is all about. And if this Minnesota team is actually going to be everything that I think they can be, I have them in the wild card. I think they actually get there this year, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to sit back a week, Joe, on these two teams and kind of see what we're working with here.
I don't think that's a bad strategy. I would say that while it probably doesn't mean a lot, I'd take note of the fact that Minnesota has covered the number in just one of their last 9 Monday Night Football games. Again, I don't think that's a trend that means a whole lot, but for some reason, this team doesn't cover a whole lot of spreads on Monday night. I would look to the over right now. You've got a total across the board sitting at about 48 points. What do we know about Monday Night Football? What do we know about primetime games? Fans and the public in general love to bet the overs. I could see this thing moving up to 50, maybe 51 points by Monday night. I think you have an opportunity right now to save yourself 2-3 points on that line by betting over 48 early.
One of the things we can say here, though, people are going to be looking at splits and stuff. And yeah, Drew Brees' numbers are certainly worse on the road, but I think it's worth pointing out that this is on the road, but this is going to be on the turf in a dome, and it's going to be very similar to what he's used to at home. And so a lot of those road splits for Drew Brees are outdoor games, and this isn't really going to factor into that.
All right, Joe, you're up first on this one. The later game on Monday night is the LA Chargers versus the Denver Broncos. Chargers are the dogs, anywhere from 3 to 4 points. And of course, the Denver Broncos coming in at about that same range, 3.5, 3 and 4 is what I'm seeing right now on SBRodds.com. How do you have this one?
All right, let's start with this question. Would we all agree that the most important position in the NFL is quarterback?
Yes.
Okay, so now that we've established that, let's look at the fact that arguably the biggest laughingstock in the NFL over the last year plus has been Brock Osweiler.
Yes.
Okay? The Cleveland Browns, who are one of the worst football teams in the NFL over the last 15 years, just cut Brock Osweiler, the laughingstock of the last year and a half, who also happens to play the most important position in football. The Broncos just signed him. The Broncos just signed the biggest laughingstock in the NFL. Why? What does that say about their quarterback position? I think there are problems in Denver that people do not realize yet. I think at best they're an 8-8 team. I think Phillip Rivers and the Chargers are extremely underrated. Taking the points here is something I enjoy. Not only that, I think they might win this game outright.
We talked about health earlier and talking about healthy teams with the Bengals, and this is another situation for the Chargers. You've got Phillip Rivers completely healthy, Melvin Gordon completely healthy. You have Keenan Allen coming back, his major weapon who went down so early last season. I mean, he was absolutely owning, and then the season was over before we knew what was going on here. I love this Chargers team. I think this Chargers team is going to surprise a whole lot of people this year. I think Phillip Rivers has a little bit of fire underneath him. This whole moving and everything, that was a big deal for him. That was a big situation for him. I think he wants to make sure that he goes out because, Joe, I don't know how you feel, but I think this might be his swan song. I mean, he might have a couple years left, but he's certainly not going to play more than 2 or 3 years here. He knows that this is the prime time with a prime time running back, a true number one receiver in Keenan Allen, a true good tight end in Hunter Henry. I mean, listen, Antonio Gates is still there. They're going to put him in red zone situations, but Hunter Henry's the real deal as well. I really like this Chargers team and have already bet this Chargers team to win this game outright.
Great points. Do keep in mind the fact that you have 2 new head coaches squaring off against each other in this game. So there's a little bit of the unknown residing out there at the moment.
And last but not least, to start us off this week, of course, is Thursday Night Football. By the time that you're listening to this or watching this, the game may have already passed.
Maybe.
However, in the case that it hasn't, let's talk about it.
And hopefully
here.
we'll be right. You know, hopefully we'll be right in this situation, Joe.
It's time to find out, boys. Kansas City and New England. This one, New England is an enormous favorite in this. It opened at -7 for them, and the money has come in on New England. So they're at -10 now in some places. You're still going to get them over on BetDSI at -7.5. So, that's where the lower end of things, but most places -9, -10. Joe, do the Patriots deserve to be getting that much love over the Kansas City Chiefs?
I can see why they are, but I can't bring myself to lay that kind of spread week one against a veteran quarterback and a veteran head coach in Andy Reid. Now, granted, I'll take Belichick over Andy Reid every day of the week, but that many points against a seasoned club that plays quality defense, it's going to be a pass laying all those points for me there. But on the flip side, do I really want to bet against New England at home as the Patriots are 18-6-2 against the spread in their last 26 games at Gillette Stadium? I don't want to do that either. I don't think Andy Reid has any tape on this Brandon Cooks, Julian Edelman-less offense. So there are going to be a few new wrinkles in this scenario. So the way I would bet it, if I'm going to play it at all, I would knock New England spread down inside of 3, and I'd go ahead and make them 1/2 of a 6-point teaser play. Matt, I don't know if you like 6-point teasers, but I think if I just need to win by 3 with the Patriots, I'm feeling pretty comfortable there.
Yeah, I mean, this game, to me, I tend to fade Thursday night games altogether. This would be like the only week where I would even consider it because it's week one and they're not coming off of a game. It's not a short week or anything like that. I tend to look elsewhere on Thursday night games. I just don't like what they bring to the table. So many unknowns, so much goes into an NFL prep week and so much comes into recovery time that you just don't get it. This will probably be something you will hear me preach over and over again on this very show. That being said, with this being week one, it doesn't really come into play. I am never one to bet against the Patriots at home, but I do not like laying such a big number in what I consider to be I always talk about what is the likeliest scenario for a team to win. Andy Reid understands yet again, the way that he wins this game is ball control, keeping the ball away from Tom Brady and keeping the ball in his team, grinding this thing out. So for me, while I would never bet against the Patriots at home, at the same time, I just don't know if they're going to be able to get to that number, Joe. So for me, even though it's week one and this would be a week where I would normally bet a Thursday night game, it's a pass for me.
All right, over on SBRodds.com, which is where we're getting all of these odds that we're giving you throughout this show. The couple of contests going on that you should be aware of. Beat the Prick, $40,000, a prize purse there, and then Beat the Bag, $25K up for grabs. Some really cool stuff, some really cool contests that you can participate in and get your hands on some really cool stuff, namely cold hard cash.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, final words of wisdom here, guys. Joe mentioned it at the top of the show, but seriously, it can be a very, very bad thing to start chasing. It is very easy to do, especially early in the season when your bankroll is super big because you're starting this year with your big bankroll and you're going into this and you're like, what's an extra 10%? What's an extra 20%? That's how you get into a big, big time hole. So just listen. It's very, very hard to do, but it's very hard to do, but have some self-control, be sure and understand where you are, how much you're willing to wager each week and stick to that because there's always going to be games the next week. There's going to be games that you like better than the ones you're trying to chase.
Or just do like I do with you can pick out the stuff in your house that you want to pawn each week and then just be willing to part with it. It's fine. All right.
If you really need action on every game, just play a 16-team parlay. Yeah. $10. Think about what that pays.
All right. 2 final things. We'll talk about the lock of the week in a moment. But first, going into week number 2 of college football, let's do a quick Saturday preview. Joe, is there any games that you're really liking going into week number 2 of NCAA football?
Yeah, there are 2 games I'd isolate in college football this weekend. One, Penn State in a revenge spot against Pitt. Now, the spread is right around 21. I wouldn't be looking at that, but the over-under is appealing, 66 total points. When these two got together last season, Penn State lost to Pitt. It was early in the year. They put 81 points on the board, and that was before quarterback Trace McSorley and Heisman hopeful Saquon Barkley at running back really got going with this offense. After that, 2 weeks after that game, they got blanked 49-10 by Michigan. From that point forward, which includes last week's first game of the season, Penn State's offense is averaging 42 points per game. I like that. I like the fact that the over is 11-2 in Pitt's last 13 games, as well as 6-2 in Penn State's last 8 games. I play over 66 total points with Penn State. I would also lay the 10.5 with Washington State over Boise State. If you take a look at the Broncos from last week, that game against Troy finished 24-13, but they got a late touchdown that came in because of a big Troy mistake and a gas defense. They also had an 80-plus yard punt return in the opening 2 minutes. This Boise offense has some issues, and people don't realize it's not the same Broncos team that we remember under Chris Peterson. Very casual, vanilla performance from Washington State last week against Montana State. They won 31-0. I think Luke Falk, the quarterback, and Mike Leach, the head coach, open it up this week against Boise, and you see a big-time win on behalf of the Cougars.
I'm looking here at this Stanford USC game, Joe, and this is one of those things where the game opened at 10. It's been bet down to where USC is only 6-point favorites in a lot of the books as we look here on SBRodds.com. I think this is a typical week one overreaction that we see a lot of times. People come out. There was a lot of teams that looked clunky in week one. I mean, if we're being honest, there were a lot of good teams that looked clunky. They came out and didn't really blow the rails off like people thought they were going to be. USC being one of those teams. I still believe in the talent of this team. I still believe that this is one of the best teams in the country. Joe, I know that you are a big fan of USC as well. Getting this at 6 after it opened at 10, I think is a steal, and I'm all over that.
Just remember one element to that, and I'm not against you. I'm just saying one thing. David Shaw and Stanford have had 2 weeks to get ready for this game. They played in Australia against Rice to open the season 2 weeks ago. They've been focused on the Trojans for almost 2 weeks now.
All right, and last but not least, let's talk about our lock of the week. And when it comes to the lock of the week, I know that everyone wants to get creative with the lock of the week, right?
Look,
but chalk wins. There was actually something that was pushed out yesterday that I saw about a guy who started the college football season with an 18 parlay. He bet $500 on it, and he cashed a ticket for almost a little over $81,000, all chalk and overs.
Oh my God,
it's crazy, right? But the chalk and the overs, the favorites tend to be the winners, of course. So don't feel like you need to have some genius insight here. Like, who is your lock of the week? Joe, you'll go first on this one.
If we're looking at the NFL, there are a lot of games I like. Really enjoy the Titans in week one hosting the Oakland Raiders. But I would say if I'm only picking one, I'm looking to the second half of the Monday night doubleheader, Chargers and Broncos. We talked earlier about the fact that the Broncos just signed Brock Osweiler. If you're signing Brock Osweiler, you clearly have a problem at the quarterback position. But I'm going to point to this. Phillip Rivers and the Chargers. In their last 14 trips to Denver, do you know how many times they failed to cover the number? Twice. Wow. Their last 14 trips to Denver, who just so happened to win the Super Bowl a couple years ago. The last 14 times the Chargers have been in Denver, they have failed to cover the number twice. I'll take San Diego plus the points on Monday night. Matt?
Well, I better get on mine if I'm going to do it because I like the Rams a whole lot. And as we sit here, the number are changing at multiple books. Yeah, at multiple books.
By the way, yeah, SBRodds.com. You can watch the numbers change live.
Yeah. So as we're live, we're sitting here and the number is actually changing. So I need to rush and get it at 3.5. I really like the Rams here. Like I said, I think Indianapolis, I think the Colts are going to be an absolute dumpster fire. It has moved to 4 in a couple of books as we've been sitting here, but you can still get it at 3.5 at a lot of these other books around here. Listen, it's going to be bad for the Colts until they get Andrew Luck back. And even when they get him back, it's still going to be bad. I think this team is going to be a bottom 5 team on both sides of the ball this year. And I think the Rams at home, game 1, Todd Gurley, grind it out, Joe. I think this is a nice number at 3.5.
All right. And you guys can call me the Oracle for this one. Pittsburgh over Cleveland is my lock of the week. I know that that's nothing really exciting. However, there's been a lot of talk about Cleveland and how well they drafted and how improved they're going to be this season. People, I think, are getting excited about that. However, Pittsburgh is still Pittsburgh. They're going to be improved this season. I don't think there's any way that you cannot take that. If you want to just make a nice, safe bet, that's why it's my lock.
8 points, huh?
Yep. I'll take the 8 points. I'll take it. All right. That's going to do it for this installment of the Play Action Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us for week number 1. Alongside Joe Fortenbaugh and Matt Brown, my name is Dave Farra. We'll be back every single week with a new podcast for you. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening.